Welcome to the Doherty Water for Food podcast. Since 2010, the Doherty Water for Food Global Institute at the University of Nebraska has worked toward one goal, a food and water secure world. One in which global food security is ensured without compromising the use of water to meet other essential human and environmental needs. It's a daunting vision, but one that is vitally important. This podcast amplifies the voices of those making waves in this space. We hope you enjoy today's episode.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Water for Food podcast. Today we're diving into a fascinating cross-cultural connection that sprang from the 2023 Water for Food Global Conference. While the digital age has undoubtedly made global reach more accessible through online meetings and emails, it doesn't always replace the connection of in-person interactions, which can often lead to unexpected and valuable collaborations. Our story today perfectly illustrates the lasting impact of those face-to-face moments. I'm joined now by Adam Keogh, Program Manager of the Agriculture Landscape Restoration Initiative with Catholic Relief Services, or CRS, and Trevin Scheidler, a senior University of Nebraska-Lincoln student studying Mechanized Systems Management from Scotia, Nebraska. In May of 2023, Adam joined us at the Water for Food Global Conference in Lincoln, Nebraska, all the way from El Salvador. Adam was joined by several colleagues, and a group presented in a handful of sessions at the conference, including one on managing soil to manage water, which focused on their work with farmers in El Salvador. While they were in town, they ventured over to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's East Campus to check out the Larson Tractor Museum, where they first met Trevin, and as they say, the rest is history. Since their initial meeting in 2023, Trevin has engaged with CRS in a consultant role, traveling to El Salvador in March 2024, and recently lined up a tour of local regenerative farms when the group traveled back to Nebraska this past May for the 2025 Water for Food Global Conference.
So we went to the 2023 Water for Food Conference as a program, the Agricultural Landscape Restoration Initiative, which we refer to here in country as Raíces, which in Spanish means roots. The program in El Salvador focuses, it's part of a long-term program of CRS to promote what we call water smart agriculture, but basically a series of core regenerative agricultural practices, like managing ground cover, incorporating cover crops. And at the time, we wanted to share our experience and some of our lessons learned and success working with smallholder farmers in El Salvador, applying and spreading these core practices and the benefits they were having in terms of increased productivity, increased soil moisture, and reduced cost for the farmers that we were working with. So we wanted to go and share that experience. And at the same time, we were just really starting to experiment with some mechanized regenerative equipment, which in the US is now very common, but in El Salvador, not common at all, as we were adapting some older equipment that we had access to in El Salvador, some tractor pulled planters and mowers to incorporate more of these regenerative practices with small and medium holders that where we could apply this equipment. So at the time, we decided to take advantage of being in Nebraska, which is the mecca for mechanized equipment, and we went to see the Tractor Museum. We were with a colleague, Jack Alexander, who had met Trevin before, and it was really serendipitous that we ran into Trevin at the Tractor Museum. And at the same time, we were looking at receiving a new John Deere tractor that was going to be donated and received in El Salvador. And we just needed support. It was like all this new equipment. We had some experience, but we really needed some hands-on, someone who could come and give us some hands-on lessons. And that's where the conversation with Trevin started. And I think within maybe 6 months, less than a year, we had Trevin in El Salvador helping us out. So that was really just great timing, and sometimes the stars align.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I met Jack Alexander at a range conference the previous year, and so that's kind of what started that connection. So then when I seen him and coming through the museum and stuff, I definitely had to talk to him. And then he kind of explained what y'all were there for. And so then I just gave you a tour of that facility. And then you wanted to see more. So then we went and moved down to the tractor test lab and seen some of the more precision equipment and stuff that's kind of happening today.
Awesome. Yeah, that seems really serendipitous that all that was happening at once and just kind of worked out that way, fell into your lap, I guess. So your initial meeting at the Larson Tractor Museum led to Trevin consulting for CRS when you got that new equipment and traveling to El Salvador to help with that. How did that initial connection evolve, and what impact has this unique partnership had on CRS's work in El Salvador or elsewhere?
Let me take this one off again, too, just from the point of view of CRS. We knew that when we got, so we had just received a new John Deere tractor, and Trevin will remember all the technical specs, and we also received a precision no-till planter. And like I said, this may be kind of common equipment. It's a little bit older used equipment, but it's very new for us in El Salvador. There's really no one else in the region working with no-till that we had access to really learn from. So we were really learning as we went, trial and error, adapting. So we were really looking for someone that could come down and knew the mechanical components, but also could really help us adapt it into a new context. And Trevin really just fit perfectly into that from his work as a student in the lab, the mechanized systems, but also from his work on his own farm, knowing how to adapt things to a smaller context. So it's just a really perfect kind of match of someone who had the conceptual skills, but that could really get their hands dirty and come and help us figure it out, because we didn't have a big parts store to go to when we needed something. We were really just trial and error, figuring it out and finding the solutions. And it really showed as soon as Trevin hit the ground in El Salvador. I think within a couple hours off his flight, he was on a tractor with our teams here, and we were getting right into lessons. And one of our biggest issues was some of our teams were a little afraid to push some of the equipment to the limit, and having someone that had so much experience, the technical knowledge and the practical knowledge, to help us kind of get over some of our fears of how to not break the equipment was really good. So just having that practical hands-on experience was just so perfect at that time.
Another part is since I was a college student, I could take the time to go down there versus if you try to find somebody with a full-time job trying to take off work would be kind of difficult. So we just planned it over spring break. And so that's that whole week I went down there. And so that was another key aspect on why I was able to go and make that happen and everything. And so,
which was perfect for us because it's spring break in the U.S. lines up right with the initial kind of right before the planting season here in El Salvador. So again, just things kept kind of lining up.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's something I wouldn't have thought of too, but I think you made a good point, Adam, about kind of the farmer ingenuity of here we have parts aplenty as long as we can afford them. But there it's like you kind of have to figure out how to work with what you have, and the fear of breaking something and not having a replacement readily available, I think is something we learn about a lot in our work at the Institute too, is we can get the equipment there, but if there's no one to fix it or maintain it or show someone how to use it, it's not really as effective as it could be. Trevin, from your perspective as a college student and looking into your future career, what was it that really interested you about CRS's work, and how do you feel like your expertise contributed to their efforts in El Salvador? I know you're also really interested in soil management, so is there a tie in there, or what caused you to want to give up your spring break to go travel to El Salvador?
The biggest one is just the fact that it was an adventure that I just wouldn't do necessarily if this opportunity didn't arise. That's kind of what I've always set a standard where if an opportunity comes up, I'm not going to pass on it if I can make it work and everything. When I did a cloth internship. I traveled the Western United States, and there I kind of gained the knowledge how it's different than a vacation to travel. You kind of get to see agricultural, differences and everything. And if you just took a vacation out to California, you wouldn't get to see that. And so when this opportunity arose where I was going to be actually in agriculture in El Salvador, it was a no-brainer for me to go.
Awesome. Well, I hope you're glad that you took the opportunity. I'm sure you are.
Yes, very glad.
So now I want to talk a little bit about more recently when Adam and the team came for the most recent conference. And I heard that you arranged a regenerative farm tour for them. So I guess talk about that, how that came to be, and what lessons you learned there or models that you think can translate to your work, Adam.
This is kind of how that came about is we really wanted to follow up on that initial training with Trevin. By the time in 2025, we'd had 2 agricultural cycles here in El Salvador. So we really started to apply what we had learned with Trevin. Our teams felt like they were a lot more comfortable with the equipment. They were really seeing the results of using this equipment in terms of efficiencies, in terms of increased productivity. And one of the things that we've noticed over the years is oftentimes we'll have trainers come down from places like the US. We've also had trainers from other developed countries like the UK, for example. And they often bring their, they talk about their experience and they connect it to their experience in a developed country. But oftentimes our team doesn't have the same context to be able to relate it to. So we felt that our team was at that point where we're really confident, really understanding what the machinery can do, what felt more confident going and seeing somewhere else and being able to bring back the pieces that we understand. Because oftentimes if you go see something in somewhere like the US and trying to bring it back to El Salvador is really hard because the scale is so different. The economic scale is also really different. But the fact that we were already so comfortable after so many trainings, getting some real results, we felt more confident that at that point, a trip through the US we'd have enough context to be able to really find what's going to work for us and bring it back, and our team wouldn't feel overwhelmed with kind of the scale of everything. So Trevin did a great job setting up kind of, because he knew the scale we were working on, he did a great job kind of identifying some farms. And there were family-run farms, and for Nebraska, they were small farms. For El Salvador, they were huge. But I think that even though the physical scale of the farms was different, for our teams to see that these were family-run farms, that their objectives as families and as farms were really similar to their own, I think we were able to find those areas of real learning and things that we could bring back to our context in El Salvador.
So I guess I kind of want to go back to the idea that this conference and Adam, your team physically being here is kind of what instigated this serendipitous partnership. How important do you think these types of meetups are? And have you had other successes that are similar? What makes you decide to maybe physically travel somewhere as opposed to kind of the digital learning or digital meetups that are certainly more cost effective and easier to fit into your schedule? But how do you decide, I guess, which of those to engage in?
Yeah, it's tough, right? And because you never really know, sometimes a conference can be a lot of travel, and especially the larger conferences, they're hard to get those real personal engagements. One of the things I really like about the Water for Food conference is that it's not so big. There's a lot of space for some great conversations outside of plenary. I think one of the biggest advantages, sometimes we get very siloed in our own projects or programs or our own farms for that matter. And, we think we're maybe doing it right, or maybe we're doing it wrong, and we're not really sure. And to be able to go and see what others are doing, recognize you're not alone, and for the case of our team in El Salvador, I think it's been a really great opportunity for them to see that they're not alone in this effort. We're working, we think that our scale is big, but then if you kind of lift the gauge, you realize, oh man, we're only working on, 5,000 hectare But when you go out and reach out and see all these other farmers or institutions and universities that are also making a huge impact, you realize you're part of something much bigger. And I think it's a great way to kind of stay motivated through the year. So I think for us, that's a big factor, is that our teams get to go and see that they're part of something much bigger than even their own project, which can be quite big sometimes too. So.
Well, we were so excited that you came. And I think CRS carries a lot of weight in its name too. So I think people look very fondly on your organization and appreciated just your presence at the conference and being able to learn from you all too. Because you do have a presence in so many different regions of the world. So Trevin, I want to go back to you and talk about how this experience, being involved in kind of a bigger project that's halfway around the world, how that impacted your future career path or your understanding of more of the global challenges in agriculture, how you might use that knowledge in your future career path, whatever that might be.
When I went down to El Salvador, I realized how everywhere there's different challenges, and I can't just go down there and fix those problems. Like, I can't just say, if you farm exactly like we do in the United States, that's going to fix all your problems, because we have our own problems and they have their problems. Everywhere in the world in agriculture kind of has different challenges. And so the biggest thing that I would want to do is start my own business from that, because then I have the opportunity to then take trips around the world and help agriculture, especially down in El Salvador, continue to take those trips down there to lend my expertise as I learn stuff. Then I can kind of keep moving that forward. So I haven't necessarily, for one thing, I want to stay in Nebraska. I kind of found that out. I've done enough traveling and everything. Nebraska's kind of my home, and it's where I want to stay. But I do still want to take trips and help, world agriculture as much as I can.
Well, and I think thanks to the digital tools, that makes that a lot more possible too, of not having to travel all the time, but kind of having the best of both worlds. Having that freedom to travel by having your own business, but also being able to communicate with people digitally as well is important. So, and I understand that you recently got a Judge's Choice Award in the New Venture competition at UNL for Sandhills Biochar. And I saw that it turns invasive cedar trees into eco-friendly biochar. So I really would like to know more about that project, what the future holds for that, and how you got involved in that.
Since I'm on a small family farm, I can't just go back and just work on the farm. We're just too small. And so one of my biggest things was, well, what can I do to still stay on the farm, but still get back to Scotia, Nebraska, or Nebraska? And Sandhills Biochar, I actually started this project when I was a senior in high school. I learned about biochar. I did it for a physics project and made some biochar. Well, I didn't think that there was a business even that I could do with it until I got to college. Then I got involved with the Angler program here on East Campus. And I pitched my idea once, and they were like, you have a really good idea, especially when you're taking cedar trees, which is a waste, to turn it into a valuable product that can really build your soil profile. It's kind of a big deal and everything. And so you need to keep moving towards that. And so I spent the rest 4 years of college just learning about biochar, just becoming an absolute expert about it. And now I'm working on financing to buy a machine to produce mass quantities of biochar. That way, when I graduate, I can go into full production. And so back to the last question, I want to start my own business just so I have the freedom and flexibility to still have my cattle and do a job that can sustain and raise, my own family. So
that's great. So for our listeners that don't know about biochar, can you just very quickly explain what that is, how it's made, how it's used, and the benefit of that?
So biochar, the way I like to explain it, is it's exactly like charcoal that you grill with. The only thing is biochar is used from waste materials versus your good charcoal that you burn with, use your good solid woods like hickory, that you smoke with, versus biochar, you're using cedar, you're using when disaster happens and destruction, like you can clean up the waste and turn it into biochar. You can do biochar from manure. So there's all different kind of, any biomass can turn into biochar. Biochar is produced through the pyrolysis. So basically you just cook it in oxygenless environment, and then that basically turns it into the charcoal, which then the charcoal has millions and millions of tiny pores. And these pores then help bacteria live inside of them. And so it kind of creates this house for microorganisms. And then it builds your soil organic matter, because biochar is just carbon, 90% carbon most of the time. It kind of depends on what you use. And so all that carbon then gets put back into the soil. And so not only are you raising the organic matter in your soil, but then you're also sequestering carbon, because when people burn piles of cedar trees, all that CO2 gets released in the atmosphere. But when you capture it like that and put it in biochar, then that biochar goes directly to the ground, and it kind of helps sequester carbon as well. Other benefits, it's a kind of a purity for water and air filtration. It's exactly like activated charcoal that people kind of use. It cleans, it helps with soil health. It's not a fertilizer in itself, but it increases the value of fertilizer when added. So there's companies that mix chicken manure with biochar to create a organic type fertilizer that then is super rich in nutrients, and those nutrients don't want to leach out, versus if you just put the fertilizer right on the ground. So that's kind of what biochar is.
That sounds amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I've heard biochar, but you did a really great job of explaining how it works and the importance of that. So kind of solves a lot of issues that we're dealing with. And I know those trees are quite invasive in Nebraska, and so everyone's trying to get rid of them. So yeah, that would be a really great way to convert that waste into something incredibly useful. So from both of your perspectives, how valuable do you think it is for university students to have experience with these real world projects and organizations like CRS? And what advice would you give students looking to make similar impactful connections? Yours happened pretty serendipitously, but can you think of any concrete ways in which students can connect with these experiences?
Yeah, I mean, for me, students just need to go to conferences is the biggest thing, the easiest thing to make connections. As many as they can, that's what they need to do. Get involved with clubs and stuff, because that's the number one way of how you kind of go and because that's literally, I was in Tractor Restoration Club, and that's kind of how I met them guys, because I was painting in the back of the museum and just happened to be there. I was in Range Management Club, and that's how I went to the conference in Idaho and met Jack. And so you just have to go to conferences is definitely the number one way I see you kind of making connections and everything.
Yeah, I would say also I started my career as a Peace Corps volunteer, so volunteering I think is a great way. And then I would say if it's not through like a bigger volunteer program like Peace Corps, if you find an organization or a nonprofit or a for-profit that you really admire, or you think it's something where you can learn from, be persistent. Reach out to somebody. Tell them what you'd like to do. We're always looking for someone to come down and help us with something. If you have an idea, usually helping a student with logistics, if they're proactive and have like an idea of what they'd like to do, having our team help with logistics is not a challenge. Having someone that's proactive and reaching out and saying they'd like to work on a certain research problem that's related to our field. We're almost always, very excited about that, having some extra support. So I would just say reach out, be proactive, find an organization that you're interested in. And then, crossing over at these conferences is a great way to build that network up, to be able to reach out. You met someone here that recommends you go there, and then that can turn into a job real quick.
Yeah, and after you said that, one more point is utilizing your summers to do summer internships and do different summer internships. Most times you have 4 years, so 3 or 4 summers that you kind of get to go and choose to do what you want. And so that can really open up more doors, because then more people know about you and you can kind of get involved. So pick a path, but there's definitely a lot of different ways you can go about, and there's a lot of different internships within, the same kind of path you want to go down.
Yeah, and I've used the term serendipitous a lot, but I think I don't want to undersell the experience either of, if you wouldn't have put yourself out there, Trevin, and been involved in things, and also have been willing to just talk with Adam and his team when they were there, I don't think that opportunity would have opened up. So really just getting involved in things, it sounds like, is key, and just finding what you like and finding those opportunities and then using your network. So thanks for all those tips. I think that's valuable information for students that are kind of looking for something similar. So that's great. And that's all I have for today, but I wanted to thank you for sharing your story. See if you have anything that you wanted to mention that we didn't get to today.
No, just say thank you to Trevin again. He knows he's always welcome here. We're excited for him to come down again, hopefully in the near future. And thanks to the Water for Food Institute and University of Nebraska, all the great work you do. And we really appreciate going every couple of years to the conference, and hope to see you in a couple of years.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, because I think this story is pretty special, and I'm just glad that more people get to hear about it. Because that's whenever I talk to people and I tell them the story, they're like, "What? That's just absolutely crazy!" They just can't believe it. And so I'm just very thankful that you guys are doing this.
I had a great time talking with you today. So thank you, Adam and Trevin, for sharing this great story and for the work that you both do daily to contribute to global water and food security, whether it's in El Salvador or in Nebraska. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. And that concludes this episode of the Water for Food podcast. We'll include a link to some additional materials in our show notes. I think we have some pictures that we can share from your visit, Trevin. And so to our listeners, be sure to check those out and join us next time for another insightful conversation on the critical issues of water and food security.
Thanks for joining us this time on the Doherty Water for Food podcast. Make sure to visit our website, waterforfood.nebraska.edu, to view show notes or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes.